Shalom, I am Rabbi Shaul Praver. You're watching Rabbi Rock TV. Welcome. You know, education is the future of this world, the future of our children, and the quality of our nation. And we have a very special guest, whom I will introduce in a moment, Dr. Gerald Kirshenbaum, the headmaster of Bicultural Hebrew Day School. Now, I have a special affection for Bicultural Hebrew Day School because my wife is an English teacher there, Beth Praver. Yay, Beth Praver. And I have a special attachment and appreciation for the school because all of my 3 children go there. And they're getting a wonderful education. Bicultural is a school where 2 cultures are taught, American culture and Jewish culture. It is truly a community school open to people of all different walks of life and education and orientation. It's the largest Hebrew school, day school in the state of Connecticut, the oldest. It's 55 years old. And our headmaster, we're very, very fortunate to have Dr. Gerald Kirshenbaum with us today. He is, as I mentioned, the headmaster. He has his PhD from Furkauf, that's a part of Yeshiva University, in curriculum instruction. And we'll talk a little bit more about his credentials as we roll along. And with no further ado, I welcome Dr. Gerald Kirshenbaum, the headmaster of Bicultural Hebrew Day School. Shalom.
Shalom, Rabbi. Thank you very much for having me.
It's great to have you here. So you really have a very fascinating background because it's not only in the private sector, you were also the superintendent of schools in New Rochelle for...
I was assistant superintendent of schools in New Rochelle. I was a principal for about 18 years of my life in the public sector. Actually, it was my first principalship I had when I was 28 years old. And I spent over 30 years in the public sector before going into the private sector.
It's not an easy job, but you seem to sort of go through
I absolutely
easily.
love it. I love it as much today, if not more, than when I first started many years ago.
Well, that's fabulous. That's fabulous. So just kind of give us a timeline of how your career went, kind of an overview.
Sure. I always wanted to be in education. My father owned an accounting firm in the city, and he kept saying to me, Jerry, make sure this is what you want to do because you may not be able to live as well as you've been living these past couple of years. And I heard him, and I actually was going into psychology. I was going to be a child psychologist. And the war started, the Vietnam War, and I was really concerned about being drafted. So I ended up teaching in the city in the South Bronx in a very poor area, and my father was happy with that because he knew that if I didn't teach, I'd be drafted, but I was ecstatic about it because it was something that I really wanted to do. And that started my career. I worked in the city for about 6 years, and then I left to go into administration. I was in the suburbs in New Jersey, suburbs in New York, and here I am now in Connecticut.
Oh, that's fabulous. That's fabulous. Now, let's talk about this idea of public education versus the private sector, and some of the problems more egregious problems that you have observed.
Well, first of all, if you look at the picture of a Venn diagram, you really can understand how public education and private education overlap and how they're different. Certainly there are a lot of commonalities when we're talking about instruction, when we're talking about supervision, when we're talking about human resources and hiring and terminating people and professional development. There are tremendous similarities. They're really the same between both the institutions. However, in the public sector, you're guided by rules and regulations. Rules and regulations of how to treat employees, rules and regulations of how to treat principals, rules and regulations for children. In the private sector, those don't exist. And so you're dealing smack on with a board, and your relationship with the board is somewhat different than it is in the public sector. An example, the issue of tenure. In the public sector, a teacher is granted tenure the first year of his fourth year in teaching. And that means a lifetime guarantee of employment unless something egregious, something immoral is done by the teacher. In the public sector, is
that a good thing?
No, it's not a good thing because the problem is that there's no incentive to really, unless it comes from you and your own self-worth, but it's from the system, you're rewarded just by occupying a chair and a desk for 180 days. And every time you phase through another 180 days, you go up on the scale and you get a little bit more money. So that's not a reward. It's certainly not a professional reward.
Now, on the opposite extreme, you have the at-will kind of situation.
Yes. In private education, you're at-will employees, meaning that at the end of your contract, which is usually a yearly contract, you can be terminated. You can say, well, you know, it's been wonderful and we've had a great relationship. However, we're moving on to someone else next year. Right. Or however, we don't have the funds. Or however.
For whatever reason. Right?
Correct. Correct.
So what do you think the midway, the perfect sort of compromise between those two polarities might be?
What I'd love to see in both arenas is the concept of renewable tenure, meaning that after 5 years, a teacher is up for reevaluation, and it's based upon not just what's happening in the 5th year, but based upon documentation and processes that the teacher has been involved in over the period of 5 years. And then the teacher is granted another 5 years. And that's what should also happen in the private sector. So that I think in the public sector, it would be an incentive for growth and professional development, really to improve yourself as a teacher. In the private sector, it would be a relaxation of worry that you're not going to be employed again, but you'd still have that incentive to grow and to develop as a professional. So it's a win-win for both systems.
Makes sense. That's kind of like the internal situation, but we also have these other things like, can you talk to 94-142, the federal law?
Well, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is the area of special education. Children who come to school with challenges, be they language processing challenges, be they perceptual challenges, be there anything that impinges on their ability to self-actualize and to realize their full intellectual potential, it's incumbent upon any school or school district to level the playing field for that child,
yes,
to make sure that that child has either accommodations or modifications so that they can realize that potential that they have. Now in the public sector, it's guided by under 94-142 evaluations with parental consent, where you're doing a full psychoeducational and you're determining exactly what modalities are strong for a child and what modalities are impinging on their learning style. In the private sector with 94-142, you're entitled to that evaluation by the LEA, the local educational authority, in other words, the school district where the private school is located, and you'll get an evaluation. However, and there's a big however, the child may be classified as a special education student, and they will give service to the child only if the child leaves the private school setting and goes to the public school. And that's true in the state of Connecticut. In my career, I've worked in 3 different states, and I'm finding that to be the most difficult here in Connecticut. So if I bring a child with parental permission and we go to the school district and we ask for an evaluation, and a child comes out as dyslexic, a child comes out as having significant language processing difficulties, and is classified, they receive no service. And
it's like a catch-22. You send them there to try to evaluate the situation, the child, the student, to help them, and then once they get evaluated, then they say they can't stay in that school anymore.
Well, the way you get out of it, or the way the school district does, is they'll say, yes, we can provide your child with service, but you're going to have to register in the public sector.
That's not the way it is in New York, though, right?
No, it's not. In New York, what's happened is that the services have started to trickle into the private schools. So a speech pathologist will go into the private school. A physical therapist will go into the private school. An occupational therapist will go into the private school.
Still a taxpayer.
That's correct. And what it's basically saying to parents and to children is that you're on your own. You're on your own to choose your education, but if there are additional needs for your child, we're not giving them to you. We'll only give them to you if you're part of the public arena.
That's Connecticut.
That's Connecticut. I find that to be not what the intent of the law was. I cannot believe that the federal government said that a child is only entitled to service if he or she is a member of the public sector. That child should be given service no matter where the child is enrolled. It's a parent's right to determine where they want their child to be educated.
They're still paying those taxes. So
well, you know, the taxes, that's an interesting point. You know, everyone grapples onto that and they grab onto that and they say, you know, why am I, especially private school parents, they're saying, why am I paying public school taxes? I don't send my children to the public sector. However, that's what our country is based on. We're America, where everyone is entitled to a free and public, education. And so it is everyone's citizen's right to pay, right and duty to pay those taxes.
Right, right.